Greetings from the underworld. This is your host, Carl Cactus Warmith, and you're listening to Thinker Stinker, where guests pick one film that makes them think and one they say stinks. Today's thinker is Mishima, A Life in Four Chapters, the 1985 biopic of the eponymous Japanese writer. The stinker is the 2006 romantic sci-fi film The Fountain, directed by Darren Aronofsky. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy. So I would like to welcome Kai Helenius. How's it going, Kai?
Good. How's it going?
Not too bad, not too bad. So your thinker was Mishima.
Yeah, Mishima, Life in Four Chapters. It's a really cool movie about a really cool dude.
Yeah, so have you read any of his work? I guess that was the first question that I was thinking when I was watching it.
So I'm kind of like I'm like one of those guys who walks around wearing a band shirt without being able to name an album. Like I'm a fan of Mishima, but I've never read any of his books. So the answer is no, but I want to. It's on my list after I finish what I'm currently reading. I plan to read a Mishima book because I'm excited.
Yeah, well, I hadn't even heard of him, I regret to say. And after watching this, that was like high on my to-do list also. I'm really interested now, especially because there's big segments of this film that are just like dramatized portions from his books.
Yeah, I didn't catch that until about 80% through the movie the first time I watched it, and then I felt like such an idiot. But now that I realize that, especially being, watching it again in preparation for this, it just, it's really cool how they blend together scenes from the books that mirror stuff in his real life and some of his own philosophy as that story slowly progresses.
It's strange early on too. There's the one book, The Golden Pavilion. There's like the two guys with disabilities, and one is trying to coach the other as to how to court women, and it's both by exploiting their disabilities. That really stuck out to me too.
The main thing that you realize after you watch it is all the scenes that were in color, save for the final scene where Mishima is trying to attempt a coup d'etat. Save for that, all the other scenes in color are scenes from the book, whereas black and white are scenes from his life. The culmination of everything is also in color, like the books. So it's almost like Mishima is writing his own destiny in the same way he wrote his books, when the rest of his life has all been in black and white and like devoid of that vibrant color that he has in his final moment of uniting, art and action.
Yeah, no, it's also a helpful cue, that color difference, because I was like you. I mean, I had no idea what was really going on with the narrative until I looked up, oh, okay, well, this is interspersed with parts of his books. So, but it does help you kind of figure that out as a viewer, that like something is different. There's a huge shift. I found the set pieces really interesting from the book scenes, because often there's just like a hard wall and then a black exterior. And then, the color choices are also super vibrant. It'll be like a really bright gold, a bright red.
One of the big book scenes was literally all set in the sunrise, the brightest moment, the golden hour of the day, essentially. And so it shows that color was very, very important to the book reenactments and making sure that they blasted out at you.
How do you feel about the speech scenes in this movie?
The speech scenes right at the end?
Well, there's the one at the end, but there's also the earlier one at Tokyo University that in many ways kind of foreshadows that last scene, because he's also being yelled at and talked over, and he's trying to spew his politics, but nobody really seems to care, at least not when he's being an orator.
Yeah, I mean, those are some of my favorite scenes, especially the ending speech, the final speech. I just find it very, I guess, inspiring, which is probably a bad look, seeing that Mishima was a nationalist. I just think it's very interesting how much energy there is in his speeches and how he really delivers them, and he truly cares. He's not just reading off cue cards and trying to appease the masses. He's just saying what he truly feels. And yeah, if you're going to say what you truly feel, the masses are probably going to reject it, since it's not something that necessarily happens often. Him speaking from the heart and not caring what they're going to say, or, what the response is going to be.
Another thing I was thinking about a lot with this movie is how it's got an American director and American producers, but it's entirely in Japanese, and the cast, I believe, is entirely Japanese also. So I guess, yeah, it's kind of weird trying to identify the nationality of the film. It's certainly not American, but I wouldn't say it's strictly Japanese either. It's got some, directorial sensibilities that are definitely not from Japan.
it was crafted with love. Like it was very much a respectful piece of Mishima. Like the guys that made it, it was what George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola produced it, and it was directed by
Paul Schrader.
yeah, Paul Schrader. They were all huge in the 70s and 80s filmmaking world, and they clearly had a lot of respect for Mishima. And this was almost like a just a piece of respect to pay respect.
What do you make of the specific performances, the characters? Because sometimes I think even more so than the biographical stuff with Mishima, the characters in his stories are like incredible, like super interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating how much information they can cram into such a short period, because if you break it down, then the books really only get, I think, max maybe 30 minutes for a book scene, and they cram in a lot about the character that you would learn by reading the whole book, which I presume is fairly long, the average length of a novel. And so they really try to cram a lot in, and they make the characters feel alive. And I think that's just a tribute to Mishima's writing, the ability to make characters that are honestly very simple. Like when you break them down, like each of them has a very simple goal and either simple faults, or you can sum them up, I would say, in a couple sentences probably. Like there isn't a lot of complexity about them, but because they're so simple, they're able to be relatable in certain aspects, and you're able to follow their journey, it being so short on screen, and understand where they're coming from and where they're trying to go. Because with the first guy in the Golden Pavilion, his goal is to burn down the pavilion. He has a very clear issue, which is the disability. In the Kyoto one, I believe, where the guy's an actor, he has a very clear goal. He wants to build his body eventually. He finds this goal. He wants to build his body, and a clear detractor to that is the money that his mother owes to these loan sharks. And then in the final book scene, this was the shortest one, I believe, in the movie, so there isn't too much information about him, honestly, but he wants to attempt to reinstate Japanese nationality and take down the Japanese capitalists. That's his goal. And what's stopping him is, all the channels that he has to go through, along with needing to have an army backing him, in the same way that Mishima tried to do close to the same thing and could not achieve it.
Yeah, that one's the most overt parallel to what was going on in Mishima's life. But I found the second one that you listed most interesting. Once he's starting to become physically deformed because of his mom's debts, I believe he sells himself to the lady who his mom is indebted to, and she starts cutting him and abusing him. And you see him deteriorate, and it's really visually striking.
That was when I saw that, when he took off his shirt and he was covered in all those scars, it's like, holy shit, this looks awful. But it really added to that drama. It's so powerful. Each scene of the movie, I feel like, is so powerful, and it's such a powerful ending.
It's structured in a really interesting way. It never aspires to give you a complete portrait of who he is. Instead, it's one of those biopics that gives you a tease to give you enough curiosity to go read Mishima's books, which I think is the perfect way to make it.
Yeah, no, it's so much better to learn a little bit about him and then want to learn more. And I've heard his books are very intense, and I read some wiki articles about him. Apparently his father, when Mishima was a baby, took Mishima's little baby body and held it in front of a speeding train 1 inch away as it sped by. So this guy's lived a crazy ass life. And the books are supposed to be incredibly intense, and really he is very scary writing almost. And I'm really excited to pick up one of those.
You're saying you're not going to use that as a parenting tactic?
I never said I wasn't going to use it as a parenting tactic. I just said it was intense.
So your stinker was The Fountain.
Yeah, fuck that movie. I hate that movie more than anything. Okay, maybe not more than anything. There are a couple things worse. No, I hate that movie more than anything.
When did you first see it? When did you even come across this movie?
I saw both these movies a month and a half ago. See, this is why I chose these movies, because I have the memory of a rabbit. So I've basically forgotten every other movie I've seen in my life, except for the movies I've seen in the past couple months. And these are two of them. And I saw them both consecutively in a week of each other. And I saw The Fountain first, and I went, that's terrible. And then I saw Mishima afterwards, and I went, that's amazing. And I feel like it almost accomplishes a lot of what The Fountain fails to do.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too, because The Fountain has an also fucked up structure. The thing is, it doesn't use it very well. It's supposed to tell three stories at the same time. I don't know what they're doing together. I was trying to figure it out. I mean, I'll confess that I was very distracted when watching this film. Like, there was no concentration going on. I could not apply myself to it.
I can sum it up for you.
Okay.
And yeah, I understand why you'd be distracted because I don't, I have my phone right by me. I'm a little addict. And I don't usually pick it up when watching movies. But during this movie, I was just picking it up and playing chess on my phone. That's how bored I was in the movie is I chose chess as more fun than watching a movie. It is insanely boring. It is an incredibly simplistic plot. And it's basically baby's first steps into philosophizing about death. It's like just Darren Aronofsky is an idiot, and it's just a movie that's supposed to be like, wow, man, death is crazy. It's like you die, and then you like energy gets dispersed, and it goes into other places, and that's basically what the movie's about. Is just about death, and it tells three different stories, all of the same character. One that's supposed to be set in the past, one that's set in the present, and one that's set in the future. But it doesn't make that clear. And so I interpret it completely differently. I interpreted one as the first story being a story from the book that was being written by this dude's wife, which is a big part of the movie. In the modern era version of this guy, Tom, his wife is writing a book. And then they will like zoom in on the book, and it'll be the past version of Tom in a medieval conquistador era. And then you think that that's the book, but apparently it's supposed to be the actual past, according to Darren Aronofsky. And then you have the future, which you think I originally interpreted as supposed to be a spiritual mirroring of what's happening to him in his modern life, because his wife is dying of some tumor that he's desperately trying to solve, even though he really has no chance of solving it with the amount of time left. And so I thought that the future version was supposed to be a philosophical mirroring. But according to Darren Aronofsky, he's in a fucking spaceship flying through the sky, and he actually just lived for like 500 years.
Well, I like your comment that Darren Aronofsky is an idiot. I think while he might not be as idiotic as Christopher Nolan, he's celebrated as the same kind of like big brain director that I think consistently makes movies that aren't as good as everybody else says they are.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And this movie, I felt, had a very clear goal, The Fountain, and it wanted to talk about death. And it brought up a lot of topics about how when you die, your energy is, redistributed throughout the universe, essentially, and death is the road to awe. It uses a story of one character who or their death is described, and then a seed is planted above their grave, and then the nutrients of their body go into that tree that grows, and then a bird comes by and picks a peach off the tree, and then the energy has gone to the bird. So it's very interesting topics, but it's done so simplistically in such a childlike manner that there's literally a third of the movie is a fucking guy in a floating egg in the middle of space flying up. And it's supposed to be a movie about death and the philosophizing about death, and it's just a guy in an egg flying into space.
Yeah. There's also, I mean, like, what is going on with the conquistador thing? Because seeing like Hugh Jackman pretend to be a conquistador is just like about the most unconvincing and horrible performance I've seen in quite some time. Like, Jesus.
I will say though, it was leagues better than than the other parts of the movie. That was probably my favorite part, just because I got to see swords and people die, and the other parts didn't have that, and so it was very disappointing.
Have you seen any other Darren Aronofsky movies?
No, I haven't seen. I've been meaning to see Requiem of a Dream, but I've seen Pi, and I thought that movie was okay, but it's the same thing, just the overly pretentious, heavy-handed hitting like philosophy stuff. Like, you need to make it subtle. You need to make it a part of the story, not just throw it at us and smash us over the head with a hammer saying, this is what death is.
Right. Yeah, Pi is a really aggressively unsubtle movie also. I think it's definitely more interesting. Requiem for a Dream is a genuinely good film, I think, although I've heard people criticize it for being one of those unrealistic, depictions / exploitations of drug users. But I mean, at least there's something going on. There's like drama that hooks you in that one. But, The Fountain, listen, don't watch this movie, people.
It is shit.
Well, Kai, it's been a pleasure having you on Thinker Stinker. I appreciate the passion you've brought. You picked two movies that you care about in very, very different ways. And yeah, that's what I asked for. So thanks.
Yeah, no problem. It was nice being on, getting to talk about good movie, that isn't bad. Mishima, to sum everything up, I think Mishima gives a very interesting story about this guy's life, and then it also gives a lot of suggestions on how to philosophize about death. He talks about committing suicide at the height of your physicality, and entering heaven beautiful. He said that the average age for a man in the Bronze Age was 18 years old. Heaven must have looked beautiful then, and now you just have old, decrepit, dying bodies. And so Mishima's philosophy is to take death head on, and prepare for it, and spend your life preparing for it, and just take it head on. And then Darren Aronofsky's philosophy is to profit majorly off of exploiting philosophies about death, to make money in Hollywood. And so I think that sums up both of the movies and why I like one significantly more than the other.
I will say I was thinking about that line of dialogue in particular, where Mishima says the thing about like how heaven must have looked beautiful then. They were dying at that age because like they couldn't take care of themselves that well. Like all their teeth would have been out of their mouths. Like they would have looked like shit. They didn't have any
True.
sort of modern medicine.
And also a big thing that dragged down the average age of death back then was infant death. So like half of heaven would have just been children, just
It would
like
have been loud
dead
as fuck in
babies.
there, man.
It would have been so
deafening.
annoying.
Doesn't sound pleasant. I mean, heaven is clearly the overrated afterlife destination.
True.